What were some challenges that you had in writing the book?
I would say one of the challenges is that I didn't have a model for this story to really look to, in the sense that there were bits and pieces of these women's lives.
Mm-hmm.
There was the NASA history. There was a history of Hampton. There was a history of the Black community. There was a history of women's progress. There were all these different stories, and these women kind of existed in the cracks of all of the stories. So pulling together their story really required going to all of these different sources and double-checking them and finding a name in the Langley employee newsletter and then double-checking that name with the daughter of one of the women who worked there. So it really was, the research was both really amazing and kind of complex. So that was one of the biggest challenges. The other challenge, I would say, is it was always my intention from the beginning to tell multiple stories using these women as the protagonists. I wanted to tell the space story,
right,
and the aeronautics story, which came before it. I wanted to tell the story of Hampton, which is my hometown. I wanted to tell the story of the civil rights movement, but maybe the civil rights movement that we didn't know. I wanted to tell the story of women getting power in the workplace, World War II, the Cold War. There were all these big picture stories that I felt these women represented and whose, their lives intersected in so many ways. And so it really took a long time to figure out how to weave all of those stories together in a way that was interesting. And that, people wouldn't just say, okay, I can't read this anymore, it's just too much. So,
right.
But to the extent I could, I really tried to let the women and their stories drive everything. So it wasn't a history book about World War II, it was a story of Dorothy Vaughan, who worked at the Langley Laboratory and whose life was changed by World War II.
Right. That's the best part of it, is the interlacing of Cold War, civil rights movement, the women issue, everything. But I think it's important right now, and it couldn't have come at a better time, to have the movie and the book come out around this time period, because you have so many issues still present right now with, tomorrow is the Million Women March.
Right.
And you have these 3 amazing African-American female role models, and it's empowering to see stories like that. I'm really excited about this, I'm sorry. I guess what I want to ask is, why do you think it's so important that we get this message that you can do this, even if you are African-American female, and these people from this time period where it was nearly impossible? For people today, what would that be for you?
Right. Well, the thing about it is, this is a great American story. I think we have this idea of what American history is. It's like George Washington, it's Alexander Hamilton, it's the Founding Fathers, it's World War II. It's all this big picture history, and it has been rarely also the history of women and Black people and immigrants, and kind of people all attached to the part of the big picture history. It's always been kind of separate. But this is that great sweep of history, the big adventure history. And I think that, it's even at a time, and even in so many ways, when America fell short of those promises, of liberty and justice for all, of the blessings of democracy. These women were still striving for that ideal. They were always working with that in mind. Uncle Sam called them up, and they gave their best to their country. And so I think that this story is really, a story of inclusion. I think it's a story of patriotism. It's a story of the best of America, even in some of the most difficult and the hardest parts of America. So I think, these are things that we're still talking about today. And interestingly, I would go into the archives at, the National Archives in Philadelphia, where they keep the NASA records, or College Park, which is sort of like the huge, repository for all these documents. And I would find documents from the 1940s, the 1950s, 1960s, talking about how are we going to fill the jobs in our technical workforce? How are we going to promote more women into positions of management, and engineering groups at NASA. Where are we going to find a pool of talented African Americans who can come in and do this work of math or of engineering that we need? So we're sitting here and it's 2017. We're still having the same conversation. So I think that's one of the reasons why the story of these women and the history behind Hidden Figures is resonating so strongly with people today.
Definitely.